Hey, Andrea Barrick, and welcome to the Tick Bootcamp podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
We're really blessed to have you, and I'm also blessed, and our audience is blessed to have a really special guest co-host, one of the most downloaded episodes, in part because she's a great co-host, and she was a great guest, but she also has one of the most beautiful children in the whole world, who melted my heart and the hearts of our community. So, Amy Packer, welcome back to the Tick Bootcamp podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be back.
Well, and I know our folks are going to be very happy to hear more of your voice and mine when your turn comes. So, Andrea,
Yes.
thank you finally for joining us. And let's first talk about not just who you are, but what you do. I think it's really cool that you're a nutritional therapy practitioner. So, talk to us a little bit about nutritional therapy practitioners and nutrition response testing first, and the context in which you do that and how you came to do that.
Yeah, so wow, it's a long journey. So I actually
Well, don't give us the whole journey. We're
no,
going to get through that
no,
together, but
yeah,
just give us.
yeah, yeah. So I got certified as a nutrition response tester in 2018, so it's been quite a while. And that involves muscle testing. So it's a non-invasive procedure that I use for people to figure out if they have nutritional deficiencies or even types of like hidden infections and things like that. And then I just recently graduated and got my nutritional therapy practitioner certification.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Since I needed another certification. And what I do is I work for Blue Mountain Wellness. It is a clinic up in Pennsylvania. Actually, I'm remote right now. But I focus on the 5 foundations of health, which is nutrient-dense diet, blood sugar regulation, digestion, sleep, stress. And there's other things that I focus on as well, but in the chronic illness space. But I pretty much just teach people how to live a healthy life.
All right. Well, and we're going to spend some time talking about this on the back end. We here at Tick Boot Camp argue to our community that before they begin trying to kill the bugs in their system, that they would be best served if they went through a prehabilitation process. And it sounds like you hit on all the prongs that we like to urge people to focus on before they begin the kill phase. So we're going to talk about detoxing, at least nutritionally detoxing and making sure that you're getting adequate sleep so that you can detox your brain. And maybe we'll talk about some of those other things when we get on the later end of this podcast. So I'm very excited already, but I'm just saying that as a teaser. Let's talk about where you're calling in from.
Yes, I am. I've been in North Carolina. I'm Western. The hurricane just hit us, but I am about 2 hours north of Asheville, so we were okay. But a lot of our friends, it's been very sad. But yes, I'm in North Carolina now, and I'm not. I am used to hurricanes because I'm actually originally from Florida, so it wasn't too scary. But I love it up here. I've have a great community, a great church community, and I've been able to help people in the church recently with Lyme as well. So
Oh,
it's been great.
well, I mean, I guess that's good and bad, but thank God to
Yeah,
have you.
yeah,
But it really sucks that they had Lyme disease.
I
But
know.
yeah, that. So, talk to us about what it was like to grow up in Florida. What were you largely doing as a young person in Florida? And as you were growing up, what do you feel or hear as your calling?
Yeah, so man, I grew up in a little sleepy beach town, I guess, but we were very close to the rural area of Florida. So you were either um, a redneck or a surfer, or you were both. So I was not a surfer, but I grew up riding horses, and
I mean,
I
you're
just,
a redneck?
yes, exactly. Um, Around the age of 8, I believe I started riding horses, and I was on a equestrian drill team for most of my life up until the end of high school and a little after. And so we would do exhibition rides, competitions, and I really enjoyed it. One of the drill teams was a patriotic drill team, so we'd carry all the military flags, and then the other one we were pirates. So it was fun. But I also fell in love with just performing in general. So in high school, I did a lot of musical theater, and out of high school, I did musical theater as well. So singing, dancing, all those things. And I also got involved with some martial arts for the exercise side of things. I did Muay Thai for roughly about 6 years and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
All right. So I have to tell you, like, when I think of rednecks, they don't look like you.
I know.
And generally, I don't expect people who are martial artists to look like you either. So you seem to be an interesting dichotomy. But
Yeah.
let's talk about your time as an equestrian athlete. We've had many people on this podcast who are equestrian athletes, and they connected their contact with tick bites to their time as equestrian athletes. So I have a two-part question for you. First, as an equestrian athlete and as someone who's participating in the safety protocols associated with equestrian athletics, were you ever taught anything about ticks and tick diseases? And then part two of the question is, do you think you were getting bitten by ticks when you were riding your horses?
Yes. Well, no, I should say no and yes. So I had no idea about ticks. Nobody mentioned anything. I didn't even know a tick existed. Like it was just, oh, there's a bug on me. Okay, cool. And we were always in the woods, getting off and on our horses, walking through bushes, and getting bit, and God knows what else. And I'm sorry, the second question.
Yeah, well, let's say with the first one first. So
Yeah.
what about ticks on the horses? I mean, do you remember pulling ticks off the horses, seeing ticks on the horses? Many people, again, for example, the last couple of times I found ticks crawling on me is because my dog was outside. She came in, she jumped on the couch because I'm a terrible, pet companion and animal companion, and I let her come on the couch all the time. Then she leaves and I have ticks crawling on me. I mean, I would think a bigger animal like a horse is more likely to have even more ticks than my dog.
Yeah, I was never taught anything. I probably have seen ticks on horses before, but yeah, I didn't learn anything about ticks at all, even on horses.
All right. So part two of the question was, do you think you were bitten by a tick as a result of being
Mm.
an equestrian athlete, or do you think you were bitten by multiple ticks as an equestrian athlete?
Yes. When I started riding horses around the age 8, and that is kind of when my symptoms started as well. So I kind of correlate back to, oh, this makes sense. I was riding horses outside a lot, not preventing anything, barefoot, shorts, tank top, like no bug spray, nothing. So I definitely believe it came from there.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about your vision for your future before we get into your symptomology. So you were a multi-sport athlete. You were an artist. You were an actor. What was your vision for your future?
It bounced around a lot. Um, so when I got a sports injury in my junior year of high school, and that led me to see a chiropractor. And then that led me into the nutrition response testing. So I really loved doing that. And then I just kind of fell into the musical theater. So I went to college for musical theater, and I wanted to be a performer, and I loved it. And I actually started learning sign language, and I wanted to become an interpreter and be on stage and interpret. And that was kind of what I wanted to do. And even for like church and worship and stuff, I just wanted to be an interpreter for the deaf community. I had pretty much stopped riding horses at that time because it just got too expensive and time consuming. Um, so, and then that was around the time that I ended up getting sick.
Okay, so let's walk back now to your childhood, where you said you started to feel symptomatic around the age of 8.
Yeah.
So give us some insight into what the symptoms were and how you and your caretakers are responding to your illness.
Yeah, so whenever I think back to my first symptoms, which people may not think are related to Lyme, I was in 3rd grade. So it was probably about a year into riding horses, and I started getting severe panic attacks to where if I didn't see my grandpa standing outside, or they couldn't, like, they had to walk me into the classrooms, I would have mental breakdowns, to where like the teacher had to pull me aside, put me in the bathroom, calm me down, and it was every day. It wasn't like anything traumatic had happened. It was just like out of nowhere, and I started getting muscle cramps, and my eyesight all of a sudden, like I had to start wearing glasses, which may not be correlated, but who knows?
I think it likely was.
Yeah. So I ended up getting like really bad muscle spasms in my neck to where I couldn't even go to school because my neck was like so spasmed, like I couldn't move it. Um, and I wouldn't say I grew out of that, but my family was very, oh, you're fine, sleep it off, don't worry about it kind of thing. I grew up with my grandparents, and then in 5th grade, my grandmother had passed away. So I ended up living with my mom, who was pretty absent. So I didn't really have many people to express that I was feeling ill too. So I just kind of was like, this is normal, whatever. By the time I got to middle school, I started getting severe joint pain, to the point where if I'm like sitting crisscross or doing any type of athletic thing, I would have to like pry my arms open and stuff like that. And I was always, even though I did a lot of athletic stuff, I never excelled. I was always the bottom on the list. I had to walk the miles. And during 7th grade, I ended up getting a traumatic brain injury. I had a classmate come up behind me and grab my ponytail and slam my head into the concrete, knocking me out. And then after that, like everything just got worse. I couldn't like think. I was falling asleep in class. I don't remember pretty much all of my like middle school time, and even like a little bit into high school. And it just, every year it just seemed everything just started progressively get worse. So do you want me to go into like my high school too, or?
Well, before you get there, I mean, I have to ask you, like, why did somebody grab your hand and bang your head on the ground? I mean,
So I still ask that question. There was, I guess there was some drama going on, and somebody had told, well, we were all like we were in a friend group, and somebody had told the girl who attacked me that I was gonna fight her friend after school. I had no clue what was going on, like no idea.
So wait a minute, I have to ask the question. So do redneck friend groups result in heads being smashed on the ground?
Yeah, so she ended up getting expelled, and it was a thing, but yeah, I don't know. I really don't know I don't know what came over her. I really don't. But all I remember, so I got knocked out, and then must have had some sort of reflexes, but were reflexes when I came to, she was like on top of me, punching me, but my feet were like kicking her. And then the administrators had to pick me up because I couldn't even walk.
I'm sorry. That's terrible.
No, it's okay. I can't believe it happened to me. I mean, my mom watched the footage and she was crying. She's like, I can't believe somebody would do that. So yeah.
So this traumatic event accelerated your symptoms, right?
Yeah.
You're sort of symptomatic leading up to that, and now we have an acceleration of symptoms. So talk to us about how that acceleration of symptoms developed in high school, developed into your high school years?
Yeah, so I started doing a bunch of sports in high school. I would try everything, swimming, running, and like I said, I never excelled, and I would always seem to get injured. And my worst symptoms were mostly digestive issues, brain fog, which I didn't even realize I had until I didn't have brain fog. And I was like, oh, this is how people actually think. um, and the joint pain and a lot of hormonal issues like cystic acne, just tired all the time. I'd take naps all the time. I could never get out of bed. And I don't, I was pretty, I don't want to say smart, but I was in AP classes, I was in honor classes, I kept my grades up,
You can
but
say smart, that's okay.
um, but one thing I really dealt with was anger. I was angry all the time. And I don't know if it was because I was in pain, or I've heard of Lyme rage before.
Bart
And
rage.
yeah, and I just I just felt like the world was against me a lot of the times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I ended up, when I was running track, I got terrible shin splints to the point where I couldn't run track anymore because I couldn't even barely walk. It was so painful.
So during this window of time between, when you were 8 years old, when your symptoms began to present, and now these much more severe symptoms, were you treating with doctors?
No, because so most of my digestive issues was constipation, like severe hemorrhoids, bloody stool. And my mom was like, you're just constipated. That's fine. That's normal.
Well, what
And
about, I mean, were you sharing with your mom that you were suffering from the joint pains, that you had brain fog, that you were angry? I mean, were all these other, these other, clear symptoms being shared with your mom, and was she just writing them all off as well?
yeah, so my nickname was Angria in my household. Um, and like I said, she was also, I believe my mom does have Lyme disease, but she doesn't believe that. So um she she just has so many mental health issues as well that and she still live we live in a moldy home. I was living in a moldy home the entire time. Um, so she just really had no concept of, really anything. She was just trying to keep a roof over our head.
Right.
And
And
so
she was so sick herself, she couldn't help you.
yeah. And yeah, oh, grandma had arthritis, you'll probably end up with arthritis, just the genetic. She threw the genetic thing out
Yeah.
there. And joint pain's normal. You're growing, you're young, you're gonna be tired. Oh, you do all these things, you're gonna be tired. It was just you're
Yeah.
young and you're
I
growing.
understand. Yeah, I'm sorry. So, talk to us about, you did start to foreshadow. You said that you started to get really sick, right? So,
Mhm.
when did that take place?
So let's see. I'm 26 now, so I started getting those intense panic attacks again around the age of 22. And it started as like I couldn't breathe. And I was like, what is going on? And I was slowly losing weight. Like I just like kept losing weight because I'd go to the gym and I'd work out or I'd do Muay Thai or whatever. And I felt so weak. I was like, what is going on? I'm just so weak. And I would do some certain jujitsu moves where I'd have to roll and I would get really, really dizzy and feel like super nauseous. And that wasn't normal for me. And I was like, there's something going on. And I kept losing weight. And of course, I was like, yeah, I'm losing weight. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, but I'm also getting weaker. I noticed that I couldn't lift as much. Um, and something wasn't right. Um, so I was at the gym and I was doing some back extensions and I felt really, really faint, like I was going to pass out. So silly me, I got in my car and drove home, and I was freaking out the entire way. It wasn't too far, I was about a mile away, but as soon as I got into the driveway, I like slammed on the horn and like flung my seat back. And my mom came running out. She's like, "What's?" I'm like, "Give me some salt, give me some honey, give me some like something. I'm gonna pass out." So, I couldn't feel my feet, or pretty much from my knees down, I couldn't feel anything. My hands were numb. Um, and so she brought me salt, water, some sugar. And within like 30 minutes, I started to feel better, but I couldn't breathe. I was having a hard time breathing.
So you were suffering from air hunger?
Yes. Oh, yeah. And so the next day, I, uh, my friend was planning to move just a couple miles on the other, oh, not a couple miles, but on the other side of the coast. And the same thing happened, but I was at a coffee shop and we were going to meet for lunch, and I started walking to the coffee shop, and all of a sudden I got that feeling again, like I was going to pass out. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like shaking, and I'm like, can I get some tea, some shit, like something? And my friend's like, are you having a panic attack? I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I need to go to the emergency room. And so, when you just get in that zone. She ended up taking me to the emergency room. They checked me for, blood clots and stuff, because it was around COVID, and I had COVID and I recovered from it about a month and a half earlier. And so I went, and pretty much they said, there's something wrong with your heart, go see a cardiologist. And I was like, what? What is wrong with my heart? Whenever I'd stand up, my blood pressure would drop super, super low. My pulse would go really high. So the hypostatic orthotension, or orthostatic hypotension, get it backwards. And so, I wasn't able to get into the cardiologist for maybe 2 or 3 months. So after that event, going to the emergency room, I just became completely bedridden. Every time I would sit up out of bed, my heart rate would go up to nearly 200. I couldn't stand. I was so weak. I couldn't eat. Instead of being chronically constipated, it was the opposite. So I was just losing fluids. Anything I ate just went right through me. And eventually it would turn into, I was getting hives, and the symptoms all just escalated super quickly within about a week. And I just became completely bedridden.
Wow. So, yeah, unfortunately, everybody who's listening to this podcast saw this train coming, right? And we were all wincing because we knew the train was gonna, the train was gonna hit you, and
Yeah.
and it finally does. So share with me when you first started seeing doctors, but because during your childhood, you were just, again, being raised by a woman who had her own challenges. So she was struggling herself. So she had some trouble helping you, but she was also seemingly from the suck it up culture, where she was just telling you, suck it up, right? You're okay. It's just a part of who we are. So when did you first started seeing doctors? Was the emergency room visit your first visit to a doctor for these symptoms, or did you see someone before that?
Yeah, so I had left the chiropractic office that I worked for to pursue acting, so I was not really in that space anymore, even though I had the knowledge and the background. I really wasn't living the life that I knew I needed to be living. I was living off energy drinks and just not eating the best. And um, I did not have a primary care doctor because I didn't really believe since since I was in the chiropractic realm, and most of my symptoms before all that happened, I was able to manage with my diet and lifestyle, like the joint pain and the digestive issues. So I never really saw a doctor until it became an emergency. And so I immediately tried to find a primary, and I went there. And during this time, he's from Connecticut. And so he's like, I see Lyme all the time. Maybe you have Lyme. They just did the Western blot, and only 2 things came back
And
positive. Yeah. So he was like, you don't have Lyme. He's like, I see it all the time. And he's like, you can't get Lyme in Florida, pretty much is what he was saying to me. And I was like, well, just check me for like everything. And so he ended up doing some autoimmune panels, and I came back positive on my, I think it's an ANA, the autoimmune or CPR or something like that. And so I ended up seeing a rheumatologist, and I got like borderline diagnosed with lupus. They're like, your blood markers are high, but they're not high enough. We can give you meds, like we can give you meds, but we don't really want to. You're young. And so they didn't offer any help. And then my cardiologist didn't really offer any help either. She's like, you're young. I don't want to put you on any meds. And you're already really fatigued and your blood pressure is low. So we're not going to put you on a beta blocker. She just suggested eating a lot of salt, drinking a lot of water. And so that's when I started deep diving into POTS and lupus and root cause of why is my body attacking itself, pretty much.
Okay. So you do have a doctor from Connecticut who does mention Lyme, and I'm assuming that's the first time you heard Lyme because, well, you hadn't seen any doctors before, so it's not like somebody could have suggested that you had Lyme.
So, sorry, I did know of Lyme because at the chiropractic clinic, we had one patient who would come to see us for Lyme, but unfortunately she passed away. So that was the only story that I knew, and I was terrified because she unfortunately passed away from it.
Okay, so so you have this experience with somebody who passed away from Lyme disease. You have a doctor suggesting to you that Lyme is something that should be considered. You get the good news that you don't have Lyme disease, so you're not worrying about dying from it because this doctor, who didn't sound like he was particularly competent, was suggesting to you that you couldn't have Lyme disease, in part because you're in Florida and they don't have Lyme disease in Florida. Maybe everybody else in the world, but not in Florida. So how do you finally get your Lyme disease diagnosis?
Yeah, so the clinic that I was a muscle tester at the chiropractic clinic, one of my I shouldn't say employees, I wasn't the owner. The girl I worked with,
Colleague.
yes, colleague, there we go. My brain's not working today.
That's okay.
Yes, she had, I had told her like all of my symptoms, and she's like, I think you have Lyme. And I was like, well, I took the test, and she's like, and then she started explaining to me how the tests aren't accurate and all those things. And she's like, I have Lyme. And I had no idea she had Lyme. She's like, let me test you, come into the office. And so she tested me, and she also tested me, and it showed up as Bartonella and a strand of Borrelia. And she's like, definitely, let's start some herbals and stuff and see if we can reduce some of the symptoms. And that was at the point where I'm like, let's just do it. Like, I definitely have it. This is it. And I didn't want to spend a bunch of money and get like an IGeneX test or anything like that. I just said, let's just pay for treatment because
Okay.
I don't have enough money to pay for a test.
So let's pause there for a second because Amy's going to take you through this next part of your journey. But I do want to just walk back a little bit because you were sharing with us two things that I think we should highlight now that we have at least the first elements of your diagnosis. And the first is that you are known as Angria or something like that. What was your name?
Yeah, Angria.
Angria was
my
your name.
sister and my mom.
Right.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that when we were talking about that, without me knowing what your diagnosis was, the first thing that came to my head was it could be Lyme rage, but it could also be Bart rage. And one of the things that we find with a lot of people who are suffering from mental illness symptoms, especially the anger element of that, they generally have Bartonella, right? And so I guess now at least we have some insight into why you were known as Angria, because you were dealing with you were dealing with a microbe that in many cases triggers anger in people who are suffering from this polymicrobial infection that you are dealing with.
Yeah, it explained my shin pain too. I had the shin splints and terrible shin pain.
What
Even
about
when,
your feet?
yeah, oh my gosh. Like when I was riding horses, if I would like jump off, my feet would just, the pain is just like ice, like shards of ice going through your feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So the other piece that I do want to highlight before I hand you over to Amy is the autoimmune issues, right?
Yeah.
Because what happens with some of these germs is some of them speed up your immune system,
Mhm.
right? Some of them slow down your immune system. And in some cases, what's happening, we've learned from some of the doctors that we've interviewed, that we have both things happening to our immune system, where we have this autoimmune function happening at the same time that another bug is suppressing our immune system, right? And ultimately, what happens before the crash is that it just burns out our immune system and we become toxic, right? And our immune system is just getting overwhelmed by all the bugs, and then of course all the dirt associated with the bugs in our system, and we become toxic, which is what results in the crash. And of course, that's what happens to you, right? You crash, you can't get out of bed. You're just in a very, very difficult chronic state at that time.
Yeah, yeah, and living in the moldy home did not help at all. That was
Yeah.
probably what made it, that was probably what made it hard for my body to fight the infection in the first place.
Yeah, because the mold is immunosuppressive, right? And because the mold is immunosuppressive, that does have an impact. But another thing that we've learned is that there are many strains of mold as well, and some of the strains of mold could also have been triggering your anger and your mental health issues and your brain fog. And so we have so many different things dogpiling onto Angria at that time
Yeah.
that
Oh, yeah.
it was certainly foreseeable that that was going to happen. I want to make one more observation, and that is that on this podcast we've often quoted one of our past guests who suggested that Lyme disease was actually a supermarket disease. And the reason her name is Phyllis Bedford from Limelight Foundation, and the reason she calls it a supermarket disease is she's argued that you're more likely to be diagnosed with Lyme disease in the supermarket than you are in a doctor's office, because you will more likely come in contact with somebody like Amy, for example, who, I'm telling you, as you were describing symptoms, I was watching Amy wince, because she knew you had Lyme, right, from when you were a
Yep.
little girl, right, and as a mom, that's very painful for Amy, right? So we often hear of people getting diagnosed in the supermarket because you sound limey, even though the doctors are telling you, they've tested you and you don't have Lyme disease, and sure enough, right, you do have a sort of a quasi supermarket diagnosis where you have a colleague who has Lyme disease and understands what it is and says, "See, Andrea, you have it. You have Lyme disease. You just do." And of course, that was something I'm sure you were not happy to hear about, having had the experience of somebody dying in your life who had Lyme disease, right? So, Amy, why don't you take Andrea through these next steps in our journey?
Okay. I have been writing things down. Like you say something and I'm like, oh, I have to write this down. I have a question about this. So I have a lot of questions, comments, all the things. Um, First, our stories are so similar. We're like almost the same age. So like as we were going through the same things at the same time. I'm also in Western North Carolina. We had to evacuate because we were in Asheville. So
Oh my
um
goodness.
yeah, so we have a lot of similarities going on right now. One thing though that was very different, I want to back up like for your childhood a little bit. One thing that was very different, and I really want to touch on it, was the support and I guess the lack of people believing you. And I'm a mom and I will never shame any mom. I know we're all doing the best that we can. Like you said, she was dealing with her own things. Um, for me, like my mom, I don't know if you know my story or heard how I got diagnosed and stuff like that. My mom knew something was wrong. Like she stood in the doorway at the doctor's office and wouldn't let my doctor leave until she tested me for Lyme. Like my mom was my advocate. And I don't know that I would be here if it wasn't for my mom advocating for me. And it was already so hard going through all of those things while having an advocate. So how hard was it going through all of those things and also having nobody believe you? Like it's hard enough when a doctor doesn't believe you or a friend that you play sports with because they're like, you're fine. Like, what are you talking about? But can you like talk about how hard it is to have the person who's supposed to be advocating for you not believing that something's wrong? And it's not shaming her in any way because like you said, she had her own things, and it was probably that she had dealt with all of those symptoms too, so she also didn't realize that they weren't normal. But what was that like, going through all of those things and not having somebody advocating for you when you were at such like a young age?
Yeah, so, I think it's a hard question.
Sorry.
I might cry.
That's
Um,
okay, we always cry here.
um, Let me start with just, I have a picture of my mom right here because I want to help her so bad. Sorry.
Don't apologize.
Um, when I had gotten sick, um, and I was telling my mom all of the symptoms I was experiencing at the age of 23, she said, I feel those every day. I wanted to like shake her, and I'm like, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
Why didn't you tell me? Because this could have maybe been prevented, not for the pity of myself, but also to help my mother. Um, so yeah, the support, I feel like I don't, like I said, my childhood was just so blurry and messy.
Hmm.
I don't really think that it bothered me too much. Um, Maybe subconsciously it did. Of course, because I'm crying, but yeah. Um, I think that once I found the chiropractor when I was 16,
Hmm.
um, I started to feel heard because she was able to heal my sports injury. Um, and I was like, oh, well, these are all the other problems I have. She's like, okay, let's see what you're eating. And so we were able to maneuver all that stuff. And that's when I really like clung to her and started trying to teach my mom. I'm like, hey, we need to eat better. We need to do this. Um, I don't think I ever I re I resented my mom a lot when I was younger, not because um she didn't advocate for me, but because I didn't like she didn't tell me anything.
Hmm.
Our relationship was just really not there. So she was, like I said, just very absent. She would just pick me up. I'd have to cook my own dinners and, all that stuff. But um I'm really grateful that she worked so hard to at least keep a roof over our head. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm probably not answering your question, but yeah,
No, you are. I think maybe if she advocated, it would have gotten you a diagnosis sooner. But like you said, she was doing the best she could do. And that's what's obvious. There's a roof over your head. That's the most important thing. You were fed all of those things. And I think it's one of those things you don't realize like until you're asked that question, like, oh, I don't know what it would have been like because you don't have that. It's like if somebody asked me what I would do with $1 million. I don't know. I've never had it. I can't tell you. I didn't miss it. I don't have it. It's one of those things like you don't think about it until someone brings up the question. You're like, oh, that's something I probably never thought of. So in that, like with her not necessarily advocating for you or believing you growing up, I know you said when you got diagnosed, you told her all these things that you were feeling, and she said she felt that too. Um, I know you also said she doesn't think that she has it. Did when you told her that that you had Lyme, did she have a hard time believing that diagnosis, or no, because she feels the same things, but she thinks she doesn't have it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes. So sometimes she's like, well, I don't have this symptom and I don't have this symptom, so I don't have it. And I'm like, Mom, it's so different. It's everybody's different. And
Yeah,
I I get upset that she doesn't advocate for herself,
yeah,
because if she would have sought help for her issues, she would have saw the signs in me and maybe have gotten help from me at an earlier age. Um, but yeah, she, even when I did the mold test in the house and everything, she was just so overwhelmed because she was dealing with her own issues. She hasn't slept in like 30 years. She
yeah,
has a job she hates. Um, she, doesn't eat healthy. She's in pain. And then she sees her daughter pretty much withering away in front of her.
yeah,
And then I say, hey, I have Lyme and there's mold in the house. We need it.
yeah,
I think it was very overwhelming for her. And she just shut down because at that time, my grandpa passed away too. So,
yeah,
well, it was about a year before. So, which was her stepdad, and who lived next door to us. And so she just completely shut down. Um, and, but I still to this day, I'm like, I still believe you have it, but I try not to, I think it just stresses her out too much. So I don't try and force it on her.
yeah. And as a mom too, it's like one of those things like, you know that taking care of yourself is important, but it's so hard to take care of yourself first and then take care of everybody else. It's like, on an airplane, they're like, put your mask on first and then do it for everybody else. But like when it's your kid, like for me as a mom, like it's so easy for me to neglect myself because I want to take care of my daughter, or like if we're both having a bad day, I'm so quick to not take care of myself because I want to take care of her. And by the end of the day, I'm useless. And if I would have spent 15 minutes making sure that I was taken care of, I could have taken more care of her. But it's just in the moment, like as a mom, you're just like, it's so stressful, it's overwhelming. And it's for you, like, I mean, she saw you withering away. She saw you like become so sick, like especially into like early adulthood. I like if you see somebody suffering that way and it's your daughter, like I think maybe she thinks she has it, maybe she doesn't, but it's one of those things like you said, the only person you had ever come in contact with that had Lyme passed away. And so you're like, no, I don't want that. I don't want to have that. I can't have that. It's just it's easier not to think about it. It's easier not to have it. Like, oh, I can't have mold in my house because that would cause X, Y, and Z. I can't have Lyme disease because that would cause ABC. Like it's just a lot easier to not, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Just don't pay attention, put it behind a curtain, just put stuff it under the bed.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so important to like talk about what we're feeling and doing all those things to realize that it's not normal to feel like, glass are in your heels and the shin splints and all of the things. But sorry, like I said, I had a lot of questions
Yeah.
and I wanted to talk about that first. But
Yeah.
going back into when you were diagnosed, like we were talking about, you had all these conversations, but so you were doing muscle response testing. What did the treatment plan look like for that?
So, specifically for muscle testing, it's different for every person. I believe we used a lot of cell core products, if you're
Yes.
familiar with those. So, first we handled, well, we used para 3 for kind of the parasite microbiome and biotoxin binder, and then a lot of support for my adrenals. They were just shot, completely shot. And so that's what kind of started that. And then while I was in the supermarket, I was at a Whole Foods store. I ran into her name's Megan again, and she's like, "You have to go carnivore." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "She's like, I've never felt better than being on a carnivore diet." I was like, "Okay." this is crazy, but okay. So it was that, and then they told me to do like hyperbaric oxygen. It was just too expensive, so I didn't do that. But I ended up seeing a functional medicine doctor who was able to write me a script, and I was able to get some IV ozone therapy. And that seemed to help a little bit, but I don't think I did enough sessions to really move the needle. But yeah, so
Yeah.
it's IV ozone and uh my herbals, binders, diet, uh and circadian rhythm. I would wake up every single morning, go to the beach. I wouldn't stare into the sun, but watch the sunrise, you know, all that stuff.
What was the frequency of your treatment, like your visits and stuff? Like, how was it like you had to go once a week, you had to go once a month? Like, what was the
Yeah.
frequency of your treatments?
So since I used to work there, I was kind of just like, hey, I need an appointment. I would just come in and out. They also had a PEMF machine, so I would hop on that. They had infrared saunas, but I just couldn't handle the heat. So we skipped that. But I would say once a week, I would maybe do the PEMF machine.
Mm.
And then I would drive to Orlando every other week and do the IV ozone. And then I would think I went in every week to get checked, to get muscle tested. Yeah.
And the carnivore diet, can you tell me? I've looked, I've seen things about it, but can you kind of explain to people what that is, like what your diet
Mm.
looks like?
Yeah. So I had a lot of hives and uh for the sciencey people out there, I had like mast cell activation syndrome. So I was having a lot of histamine intolerance. And so I was actually really scared to try the carnivore diet because meat can have higher amounts of histamine depending on if it's aged or not. And so I ended up just buying fresh lamb from a company called Billy Doe Meats that they immediately freeze it so it's low histamine, and then fresh cuts of like ribeye and tallow. I was like lion diet, beef, salt, water, that's it. And um, within like 2 or 3 weeks of doing that, I saw huge improvements in my strength. Like I wasn't able to lift my arms up, and I was able to do that and walk. And um, so yeah, beef, salt, and water. I don't recommend that for the rest of your life, but it definitely is a very amazing therapeutic diet.
Yeah, so what does that look like for you now? Like, I guess a modified, like long-term version. Are you still
Yeah.
main carnivore or?
So I did the beef salt water for maybe about a year, and then I started adding other animal products, so butter, eggs, and then I just slowly kind of started adding produce in. So right now I predominantly eat a heavy animal-based diet, meat, chicken, um, flash frozen salmon, and then anything that's seasonally for the produce. So like right now, I've got some squash and some sweet potatoes, and I go to a co-op supermarket that has like locally organic sourced produce. So anything that's like locally grown and seasonal, like in season, I'll pick that up if I like it. I'm not really a big produce person anyways. I don't really like
Yeah.
fruit. So I'm more of I'd rather eat vegetables to be honest. But um I do see that some vegetables do give me issues. So I stay away from them.
I have a personal question
Yeah.
about the carnivore diet. Um, I I try to eat high protein, obviously high protein, not a lot of processed stuff like meat, veggies, fruit. Like you said, I also prefer vegetables over fruit. But the thing for me with the carnivore diet is I have a beef allergy and an egg allergy.
Right.
So, do you have any suggestions for those? I know that a beef allergy is pretty common in like the Lyme community and things like that. With the carnivore diet being so helpful, do you have any suggestions for people with allergies to like beef or eggs or something like that? Like for breakfast, I don't want to eat like grilled chicken for every single meal. Like, are there other options. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So have you, is it all red meat? Or is it just beef? Have you
Just
seen
beef.
just beef? Yeah. So I've seen, there's a woman, I think, oh, what's his name? He's one of the carnivore guys. I can send it to you later, but he interviewed somebody with alpha gal, and she was pretty much able to get into remission and eat red meat again. But um, I've seen people with the alpha gal or the red meat allergy be able to eat deer. And
Yes, I can do deer.
yeah, so like game meat, bison,
Hmm.
deer. I prefer that honestly over cows. I think it tastes better, and it's just
Yeah.
uh usually better quality just because beef is so conventionally raised. It's easier to get more free range deer and bison. Um, Also, I like getting whole chickens instead of just like chicken breasts or anything like that. So I can make like soups, which are I love soup. I think I
Yeah.
lived off like uh, beef soup for a while, but
Mhm.
um, yeah. And then I'm not sure if you have a fish allergy, but cod, salmon. I'm allergic to shrimp, so I stay away from that. But those, and then yeah, eggs. Have you tried duck eggs or no?
I have,
Maybe try duck eggs.
I'm a little nervous because my
Oh
egg
no.
allergy is anaphylactic. So
Okay,
it's
then don't
like,
do that.
I don't want to like do anything like that. But speaking of triggers and allergies and things like that, something you said earlier was, well, you talked about the mold. But then you also talked about how when your symptoms really started to get bad was a month post COVID. But
Yeah,
you said you recovered fine.
yeah.
Um, do you feel like COVID is kind of what caused like the big flare of all your symptoms to like catapult, I guess?
Yeah, so my first YouTube video that I made, it's called The Straw That Broke the Camel's Back. And I kind of go through that journey of my bucket filling up and eventually getting COVID and it overflowing. And you see that a lot, not just specifically with COVID, but Epstein-Barr and even the flu, like just any type of virus can, make that cytokine storm and inflame everything. And yeah, I really think that that catapulted me into just the end of the line. It was too
Mm.
much, too much.
So in that, like you got COVID, you got better, and then all your symptoms started. And this is you went to the ER, and that's kind of when they started sending you to specialists and things like that. And you talked about kind of the lack of resources that you were met with. Um, I know that's a common thing for a lot of us in the Lyme community. You go to a specialist who's really supposed to know everything. You get there and they kind of know nothing, and that's really frustrating because they know everything about the book, but we're not in the textbook. And so then we kind of throw them for a loop. And it's hard. Number one, you're like, these doctors are supposed to know everything, and now they don't know anything about me and they can't help. Or you're told it's one thing and it's probably not that thing. And you go through all these tests and you're put through the ringer and you don't have any of the things that they think you have. Or they're like, oh, well, we could put you on medicine, but you're so young, you're so healthy, we don't want to do that. Or it could be this, but you're so young, you're so healthy. Or I always heard, well, you're too young to have that. I'm like, well, I don't know what that means, but here I am. So I'm sitting in the rheumatologist's office at 12 years old. I
Right.
don't know what to tell you. So I'm here for help. And then you talked about at the chiropractor's office and the muscle response testing and everything like that, how they kind of said, oh, it could be that, or it could be Lyme. But then you're at a primary care and he's like, oh, yeah, it could be Lyme. And he's from Connecticut, but then your Lyme markers weren't all the way up. So he's like, no, it can't be that. But then you go to a holistic doctor, it's like, oh yeah, I can definitely help you. It's probably definitely this. Let's like start treatment and things like that. And of course, there's a place for Western medicine. There's a place for holistic medicine. They all work together. We need all of them, but I think it's so common in the Lyme community that holistic medicine has been very helpful. And it feels like there's a lack of resources for us in the Western medicine community. What was that like for you? Because I know you said you would been to a chiropractor a little bit prior to that, but then you just kind of living your life, energy drinks, eating whatever, doing whatever. Was was it kind of like shocking to go to a doctor and have them tell you we don't know what's wrong and we can't help you? Or like what was that like mentally and emotionally to go through all of those things with all the different specialists?
So in the back of my mind with, what I learned with the holistic medicine, I I just wanted to rule out any life-threatening like situation, because
Definitely.
regardless of what I found uh out in the Western medicine, I would have went back to find a holistic or functional medicine. Um and I remember sitting with my doctor, my primary, and I had like hives all over my wrists, and my heart rate was like 113 just sitting there, and I couldn't breathe. And he's like, "You have anxiety." And I'm like, "Yeah."
Thank you for that. I know, but that's not
I'm
the issue.
like, I'm like, I'm like, well, probably because I don't know what's going on, but that's not why I'm having all these issues. It's a side effect. It's a symptom. Like, why am I having anxiety? Why am I having hives? Why am I, all these things? And they just labeled it as anxiety. I remember him like writing it down, and I would get like my return paper. It's like severe anxiety. And even when I would go to the emergency room I'd get like, so I would have, I don't know if they were seizures, but um, I think they were like non-epileptic seizures. I would get like my whole body would tense up and I couldn't like move or anything. And sometimes I would shake. But I would go to the emergency room. They're like, "You're fine. You're stressed. You have anxiety." And they would like give me some like drip IV anxiety stuff, which it calmed me down a little bit, but I never ended up like actually like taking it and using it. So um I I kind of already expected the not the backlash, but just that they weren't going to help me. Like I knew that I had to figure this out for my own.
Feel like in the Lyme community, you like go to the ER and they give you a bag of fluids and they're like, all right, see you next week. Like it's just kind of just what happens.
Yep.
So how long did you do treatment, or are you like constantly just continuing treatment? Like what's that timeline like?
Yeah, so I constantly do treatment. I see another colleague of mine. She owns a clinic up in Iowa, and I think she's in Jersey too. She has a really big clinic. She had Lyme as well, so she's also a muscle tester. So I just chat with her virtually, and then I see a integrative health doctor here in North Carolina. It's called Robin Hood Integrative Health, and I just go to him for like every 6 months. We just check on my thyroid and some other things that I'm still trying to. I'd say I'm like 95% better, but there are some things that I'm still working on. My thyroid's still pretty messed up, and so we're trying to work on that. And then when I moved up here, we did a mycotoxin panel, and all of the um, markers were really, really high. So I actually started um, a antifungal called itraconazole, and I did that for a little bit, but I didn't like it. I didn't like the way it made me feel. So I kind of stopped that treatment. And my friend has a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, so I go over there and use that now here in North Carolina. So I'm just always, I try not to stress though. I just manage my stress, eat well, and I know that this is, it took almost, my entire life to get to that point. I don't expect um, to be 100% better in a short amount of time.
Yeah. That's my doctors always tell me that. They're like, it took years for this to happen. You're not going to feel better in 2 weeks, which I think a lot of people have to remember. Like, it it took years of getting sick. It's going to take years of getting better too. And slow and steady wins the race. But so you're better, like you're well enough, you're working, you have social life, like is that all normal-ish or whatever?
I definitely had to adapt and change. I used to go, 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 go. And I had severe FOMO, fear of missing out. And so now I have, we call it JOMO now, joy of missing out.
Yes, I love that.
So I just there's sometimes I just have to take time to myself and say no to things, which is challenging, but it has served me in such a beautiful way, just with my relationship with the Lord and even a relationship with people. I'm in the choir in my church, so I'm at church like 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And I just got a remote job, so I'm at home, which has been nice. But before that, I was able to drive. I had a job where I had to drive and walk and do a bunch of stuff. I was able to do that just fine. I would sometimes, have feel faint or whatever. I knew what to do.
Yeah.
Pop a salt tab, drink some water, eat something real quick, put my legs up in the air, breathe. And within, 15, 20 minutes, I was back and ready to go. So, yeah.
Okay. This one, like, I don't know. It's hard. This question is hard to ask when you've been sick your whole life, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, how is your life different now than it was before Lyme? Because you and I have a similar story of I don't remember life before Lyme necessarily. I mean, maybe kindergarten, first grade, but that's hard enough as it is.
Yeah.
So, do you have maybe how is life differently now since from before you were really sick, I guess would be a better way to put it because you probably don't have a great recollection of pre-Lyme because
Yeah.
you were so young. But I guess the comparison of maybe just from early on to now.
Yeah, so there's definitely a difference. I think maybe I wasn't in tune so much with my body, because
Mm,
I pushed myself. I was a fighter. I just did it. Like, even though I was in pain or didn't feel good, or I always question, I'm like, man, I haven't used the bathroom in a couple days. Like, I don't feel good. But it would always like just roll back around and kind of, it was always like I always felt like I was a merry-go-round kind of. But I was at least able to do these things. Like, I was able to push my body.
mm.
And then when I became bedridden, I was not able to push my body at all. Like, it was done, empty, no charge on the battery. And so that's kind of what I'm still working up to, is being able to push myself like I once was able to, because the action of running, that can make our nervous system feel like we're being chased, like we're in fight or flight. So I haven't really been able to do those things because I'll sprint or I'll run or I'll hit the bag, and then my symptoms will flare up because my body feels like it's like there's something wrong. It's like a
Yeah.
danger response. So I'm trying to kind of build myself back up to, with my central nervous system, to say, hey, it's okay. This is,
Mm.
I'm having fun right now. This is not a threat. So I'm working a lot with like the brain retraining and stuff like that.
Yeah. One of the things you said that really stuck out to me, and you may have not realized it. You talked about how before you would push yourself and now you don't. Um, I was the same way. It was just sometimes I'm bad still to push myself. But you also talked about how now you're much more in tune with your body. And I think that plays a big part into our healing is to stop pushing ourselves. Because if you allow yourselves to heal enough, that activity is no longer pushing yourself. It's just something you're comfortably able to do. So 3 years ago, when you were really sick, what you're doing right now would be pushing yourself. The
Yeah.
mental, emotional, and physical toll of sitting here and talking for hours and going through all these things and recapping, that would be pushing, but now it's not. So it's one of those things where running would be pushing your body right now, but a year and a half from now, a jog could be your favorite thing to go on, and that won't be pushing, but it's honoring your body and honoring yourself where you're at now and knowing that, hey, I'm not going to go on a run anytime soon, but that's not fully out of the picture. It's just a not right now kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't really like running anyways, but it, I'd rather hit the bag, but still it
Yeah.
can, yeah, it can get yeah, it revs me up.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because well, this is probably just normal human biology, but whenever I would go to my Muay Thai classes, they were usually late at night, and it I never knew why, but I could never sleep.
Yeah.
Because I was in fight or flight.
Yeah.
I just didn't know it.
You were like pumped up before bed, ready to
Yeah.
fight somebody, and your
Yeah.
body's like, no, it's time to go to sleep.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to others who are like in the middle of Lyme, whether they know it or not? Like they're in the throes, they're in the middle of all of this. What advice would you give to them? It's a loaded question, I know.
No, yeah, I just, thinking back, I think we need to start with not fearing what's going on, especially our symptoms. Like, I'm pretty sure we can relate. Like, sometimes I feel something and I'm like, am I having a stroke? What's going on? I think attacking the fear first can really catapult us into a quicker healing, because I think that's what kind of spiraled me in my beginning, because they were like, we're going to check you for blood clots, you might be having an aneurysm, we don't know what's going on. And that's
Terrifying.
yeah, it was. And then after that emergency room visit, it was just downhill, because I was like, what's going on? I'm dying. And so I think when there's a guy that I watch on YouTube, and I'm pretty sure it's a common acronym, but FEAR stands for false, I'm not gonna remember. What is it? False evidence appearing real.
Yes.
And so anybody who, if you think you have Lyme, or you or going through it, just try and not to let fear run your mind.
Yeah.
Our thoughts really do communicate with our cells, and health begins in our cells. And if we're constantly in fear, telling our body that there's something wrong, that fight or flight's not going to shut off, and your healing is going to be a lot slower.
Yeah, it's hard to heal when you're constantly running from a bear. And that's like me. Fear was one of like the biggest things, and still I feel like it's one of my biggest symptoms. And
Yeah.
like you said, it's so hard, especially you go to the doctor because you want to find out what's wrong with you, but you have the fear of getting a diagnosis, because then that's this whole other thing. But one of my doctors told me something that I loved. He said, we're going to name it, but we're not going to claim it. Like, we have to name this thing to know what's going on, but it doesn't mean that's who you are or your identity. Like, we're going to name the thing, but we're not going to claim it. We're just going to take care of it. So I think that's a really good like outlook to have on that as well.
That's what acupuncture, they never diagnose people. They either say like your body's damp or dry or hot or cold, so that you don't claim these things. And I love the Lyme community. I'm not bashing them, but I have been part of groups where they're like, it's like becomes their identity, and I'm like, that's not where there is light at the end of the tunnel. But
Yeah.
you have to believe it. Like, you have to look up. You can't just constantly be looking down. You're never gonna see the light at the end of the tunnel if you're doing that.
Yeah, it's hard. I feel the same way. There was a long time that I didn't want to identify with the Lyme community because I didn't want the doom and gloom. And there was a time where I wouldn't even post about having Lyme. I was like, well, I'm just going to pretend I don't have it. I'm just not going to talk about it. but you also can't heal from something if you pretend it doesn't exist. So there's a line of it can't be your identity, but you also can't ignore it. It's like,
Yeah.
well, I don't want people to know that I'm sick, or I don't want to do this. But then like you post about it, like, well, I don't want people to think I'm doom and gloom. It's like you don't have to make it a big deal. It is what it is. It's a part of you, but it's not who you are. It's just like I wear glasses, doesn't matter. I have a tattoo, it doesn't matter. I have Lyme disease, I'm healing. Like it's not who I am, it's just another part. It's a fact about me. I don't know. I always use it as my fun fact when like, hey,
Yeah.
welcome to the party. What's your name? I'm like, I'm Amy, I'm sick. What's up? Like it's probably not a great fun fact, but I use it. I don't have anything else interesting about myself. But it's sort of things, you name it, you don't claim it. And I love your outlook on that you don't let it become
Yeah.
like who you are.
Yeah, I try to, when I tell people that I'm going through stuff, I say I'm experiencing Lyme,
Yeah.
or I'm experiencing mold illness, just because I think it is a season, and whether I have it or for my whole life, if I deal with it my whole life, in heaven, I'm gonna have a new body, so eventually I will not have Lyme disease.
Amen. I love that. So what advice would you give to others who are not sick with Lyme, but they want to protect their families from it? Because, like you said, you were really not educated on ticks or Lyme disease or anything like that. Like it just didn't cross your mind down in the redneck surfer part of Florida.
Yeah, so I definitely, so I'm actually part of GLA. I'm an ambassador, so I have I try to spread awareness wherever I go, especially my friends are like, we're going hiking. I like text them, I'm like, okay, this is what you need to do. Um, so I kind of obviously if you're out uh, where there's grass or wooded areas, anything like that, I try to tell people if you can, wear long sleeves. This is like the prevention side. Wear long sleeves, long socks, tuck things in, and also you can get Nantucket Spider has a really good like non-toxic tick spray. Just spray yourself with some essential oils, and then after you're done hiking or whatever, you can like make sure you take everything off outside. Well, not, yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Shake everything out and then hop in the shower and check your body for something. Even like your scalp and your hair. I recently had a girl at church. Um, this actually just Wednesday. She had asked for prayer because she's getting treated for Lyme, and she had a tick on her scalp, and she didn't know for like probably a couple weeks because it was engorged. And so, yeah, so just check yourself. And then if you do happen to find a tick and it is engorged, make sure that you remove it properly. Just don't rip it out. I know there's a girl who sells that tick thing. Get something like that, tweezer or something, to slowly pull it out. Try and keep the tick if you can, so you can send it to a lab. And then immediately try and find a doctor who will get you on doxycycline. Like, I'm not a huge antibiotic person, but if you find a tick, please get on some antibiotics.
Yeah.
Because it's your symptoms you may not get a fever, you may not get a rash, you may not get these symptoms right away, but a month later, you may start developing joint pain, and you're like, where did this come from? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so that's kind of what I tell people to do. And then if it's chronic, obviously, let's start some herbs, some binders. We got to open up your detox pathways. We're not going to start crazy detoxing, because when we do that, it can actually damage our mitochondria even more, creating the Herx reaction and making us just feel even more sick. So I really like to, when I work with people who are chronically ill, whether it's Lyme disease or whatever, we make sure that their detox pathways are open. So that means they're methylating, their B vitamins are being taken care of, they're eating properly, they're moving, they're getting outside, they're getting fresh air, they're grounding, all these things first, and then we can look at the herbs, the binders, so that we can like start pulling things out.
Passing it back to you, Rich.
All right. So thank you, Amy. Let's talk about what was going while you were doing your work and you were trying to overcome the challenges that Lyme was creating for you. Of course, your work was working on you. So talk about how you were changing and how you were growing spiritually, emotionally, physically, while you were going on this journey of healing.
Yeah, so when I initially got sick and bedridden, I actually lost my job. I got fired. I was a waitress at the time at a high-end Italian restaurant, and she said, "Hey, if you can't come back, I have to let you go." And so they let me go. And I was actually I had two restaurant jobs. The other job was fine, but I just couldn't work because it was very hot environment. I was behind a stove all the time, so I had pretty much lost my jobs because I couldn't work. I lost my fellowship in my community with my church because I couldn't drive. And I felt pretty much hopeless at that time because I had a lot of like psychological issues going on. I was seeing things. I sometimes end up like hearing things. I thought I was going crazy. I had begged my mom to admit me to the ER psych because what was going on. I mean, I remember there were times where I just was in my room for days and I would just read my Bible. I think I read my Bible like front to back like twice during that time because I didn't know what else to lean on. I had nothing else. I had nothing else. Um, and so I'm actually really grateful for that time in my life because I grew so much with my relationship with the Lord. And I always think about when Jesus is with Martha and Mary, and Martha is stressed out and she's cleaning the house and trying to serve Jesus, and Mary's just sitting at her feet. And Jesus said, "You know, Martha, you're doing great, but Mary chose the better thing." And at the end, he says, "And it will not be taken from her." And in that moment, I said, "You know what, Lord? You are the only thing that has not been taken from me. I lost my health. I lost my finances. I went into extreme debt because I couldn't work. I lost my job. I lost my friends. Um, but I didn't lose Jesus." And that's what I held on to. I knew that he had a plan for me. And he certainly did. He certainly did have a plan for me. So I clung to Philippians 4:8 during that time. It kind of goes through of it says, "Think of the things that are pure and lovely." And when I would have these episodes of intrusive thoughts and all these things, I'd go back to that verse and I would dissect it. Okay, what's true? All right, well, I'm young. Um, you know, God has a plan for me. He's not going to let me fail. He's with me. I'm not alone. You know, and I would just go through it, and it really it saved me during the darkest moments of experiencing and going through Lyme. Yeah.
So, Andrew, one of the things that we're blessed by as the longtime host of the Tick Boot Camp podcast is that the pattern of healing is always the same.
Yeah.
And part of that process is recognizing that that there is going to be a more pure version of yourself when you get through the suffering that Lyme disease causes you. That there is a purpose here, and once you identify that purpose, and once you understand that you are going to be able to serve at a higher level, first become a servant, and then serve at a higher level, that's when the healing really begins, right? This isn't just a podcast that identifies those strategies or those medical tools that you use to get better, because you're suffering from toxicity physically, you're suffering toxicity socially, you're suffering from toxicity emotionally, and you are also suffering from spiritual toxicity, right? And you have to cleanse, at every single level. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, all of this was building up, and everything else was leaving you, right? The good news is all people left you, but certainly the toxic people left you, right?
Yeah.
And and there were toxic people at work, and there were toxic people in your family and your social circle, and they were now gone. So now the toxicity was gone, right? And you were toxic physically, right? But now all of the things you were eating and shouldn't have been eating and drinking and should have been drinking, all that, now that was gone, right? And as each one of these things that were making you more vulnerable to the illness were being taken away, you found the one thing that couldn't be taken away from you, would never be taken away from you, wouldn't be abandoned. And as you started to build on that foundation, then you started to heal, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's I wouldn't I wouldn't change it for the world, honestly. And it's really what catapulted me back. I came full circle, right? Because I was doing nutrition and I stopped and was pursuing something else and ended up getting sick, and now I'm pursuing the same thing I was when back then. And now I have so much more compassion and knowledge and experience to help people. And I just always ask the Lord to use me for his glory and to help heal people, um, and to guide them and put them on the right path.
Andrew, one of the reasons why we urge people to uh, only work with other healing professionals who have had Lyme disease, is because you're the only ones that can really read what the other people are going through and help them to interpret their own, what we call the onboard diagnostic system, so that they can build on that and ultimately heal, right? I mean, I've said to people on more than one occasion, don't listen to me. I've never had Lyme disease. I've interviewed many people who have had Lyme disease. I have a co-host who I've spent thousands of hours with, and I've watched him heal from Lyme disease. So I've observed some patterns, but don't listen to me because I haven't had the disease. And as a result, I'm not the guy that you should be listening to. But you, because you've been on the journey, not only did you come home to rediscover what God created you to do, right? I mean, in most cases, we know when we're children and we don't have all of this social baggage, and educational baggage, from the indoctrination system, all uploaded into our heads. We find ourselves doing things and liking things that are consistent with the way God made us and the purpose for which He's created us to serve, right? But then we get away from it, right? There are social reasons we get away from it. There are emotional reasons we get away from it. There are all kinds of reasons we get away from it. And then, I had argued to you before the podcast began, you become a more pure version of yourself. And there's two pieces to that. The first piece to that is you go back to understanding what you were created to do, right? And you were supposed to be a nutritional healer, right? But even more importantly, you now understand how important that is to the healing process. And you can now share your experiences with other people in a way that you never would have been able to share with other people had you not been on the journey yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
So now there's one more piece of this I want to talk to you about, because you went through healing spiritually, you went through healing physiologically, certainly through your dietary change that you made. But you did talk a little bit with Amy about the neurological healing and the brain retraining. So talk to us about what you did there and how that was an important part of your healing journey that you couldn't go on, of course, until you began your spiritual healing.
Yeah, so that's still ongoing. I I never tried any try to release it techniques. It was very much focusing on the truths, um, that the Lord has promised us. And I know not everybody is a Christian and not everybody's going to read their Bible, but that's really what helped me get out of the fight or flight, was reading truth in scripture of who God says I am, and what my life can look like when I put my burdens on Christ. And so I kind of, what I would do, because brain retraining courses can be really expensive, I would just YouTube some videos of like visualizations or those things, and then kind of tie it into what I believe in my life. And so, if I have a symptom, I try to, the Bible says, subject all of our thoughts towards Christ. So I would try to capture that thought, and I would compare it to the truth that I know to be true. Well, what's going on? Okay, and why am I feeling this? Am I anxious right now? Did something happen? Did maybe I had a really hard time with smells for a long time. And I think it was more fear than anything, because if I would smell something burning, I'm like, I'm having a stroke. Why do I smell something burning? And it would just escalate into something. So just controlling those thoughts of like, hey, you know what? I just, that person walked past me and they had a cup of coffee. Maybe I'm just smelling the cup of coffee. Or, I would try and talk myself down and out of those things and just really focus on truth. And that's really where the healing and getting out of the fight and flight started to happen.
But I think it's really beautiful that you're describing this, right? Because everything you're describing is consistent with the way we learn how to control our mind and ultimately then control the expression of our nervous system, right? Because one of the biggest challenges that we have with Lyme disease is that the disease changes our neural pathways, right?
Yeah.
And it could be because the bugs that are in our brain. It could be because we've been gaslit. It could be, our brain changing so that we can be served while we're sick, with neural pathways that serve us while we're sick. But then, of course, those neural pathways don't serve us well when we're no longer sick or when we're healing, and we have to change them. And and what cognitive psychology teaches us is that the way our brain functions psychologically is that our beliefs trigger our thoughts trigger our thoughts trigger our feelings, our feelings trigger our actions, of course, give us our results, and then our results reinforce our beliefs. And the only part of this process that we're in control of, because everything is automatic other than our beliefs, right? And what you needed to do is you needed to change your beliefs so that you can then change your neurology, so that you can then change the automatic thoughts, feelings, actions, and results. And I think what's really beautiful about the way you describe this is, through your study of scripture, you were put in a position where you learned how to use what David Barrick calls the decision matrix, right? And as soon as you didn't feel good, you didn't allow it to bring you to an action where you'd get a bad result. You walked it back and asked yourself, what thought did I have that caused me to have this feeling, right? Then you went back and said, what did I have to believe in order to have that thought? And you showed yourself the truth that scripture revealed to you. And because you showed your brain the truth that scripture revealed to you, you changed the neural pathways, and you stopped the neural pathways and the beliefs that didn't serve you from existing any longer. And you were retraining your brain, or you were neural sculpting your brain. So you then had healthier beliefs that triggered healthier thoughts, that triggered healthier feelings, triggered healthier results. And it triggered you onto your healing journey. That is unbelievably beautiful, the way you connected what what so many people are studying in the personal development world and the cognitive psychology world through your study of scripture.
Yeah, so the way when I started learning about the brain retraining, actually, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Beth O'Hare. She actually passed away, which is very sad. She helped me a lot with all of her resources on mast cell activation syndrome. Um, but her big correlation between brain retraining and mast cell activation syndrome is why I started to do it. Because when we have that fear or that belief or that thought that triggers this cascade, it will actually release, it'll tell our cells to release mast cells, which will cause the inflammation and the damage to our body and the histamine issues. And so I thought, okay, if I can at least eliminate this and eat low histamine, then uh, I can start to heal. Like the inflammation will go down. And that's exactly what I did, and it worked.
Yeah, so, but because Andrea, remember, we only have our nervous system can only express in one of two ways, and we can only be in one expression of our nervous system at a time. We're either going to be in the sympathetic expression or the parasympathetic expression of our nervous
Right.
system, right? And what's happening was when you were believing the lies that Lyme forces us to believe, what happens is you were constantly being triggered into the sympathetic expression of your nervous system. You were stuck in fight or flight.
Yep.
And when you're stuck in fight or flight, your immune system doesn't function, right? Because it's just your survival software taking off. But through your study of scripture, you were showing your brain truth. And truth was that you were not supposed to be sick. Truth was not that you were not supposed to be anything other than the servant that you were created to be, right? Because every one of us has been created to serve everyone else. We were given a piece of God's creativity, and we were supposed to use that creativity to serve everyone else. And one of the challenges that so many of our followers have had to deal with is a loss of their rudder. You lose your purpose, and because you lose your purpose, you feel like you can't serve, and because you can't serve, you feel lost, right? And it was you going back to the foundational truths that Jesus offers to us through Scripture that allowed you to heal. And it's unbelievably beautiful the way that you've articulated that. And I just wanted to sort of bring some of the science to support the process that you've gone through.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I love, people are like, oh, the science disproves, anything in the, I'm like, no, it actually just makes it even more amazing and beautiful to study because, I'm not, if you've seen the laminin molecule that we have in our body, it's shaped like a cross, and this molecule is a protein that holds us together, and it holds everything together. And we know in scripture it says that, Jesus holds everything together. And so it's yeah, it's a beautiful full circle, and I'm just honored to have experienced it and to be able to share that with other people.
Well, thank you. That you've absolutely blessed me and our listeners with this really beautiful description of your healing journey. And I could talk to you all night about this, but it
Yeah.
wouldn't be fair to you or to Amy or certainly your families if we continued this. So we're gonna have to wind down now and let Amy ask you the final question. And we'll have to just commit to doing a part two so we can maybe do an entire podcast on scriptural healing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so first off, I just want to thank you for being here. I know that, yes, we're just sitting here chatting, but I know it's a time dedication to be here to talk about it. I know it can be emotionally straining talking about this whole journey. Don't be surprised if you feel really tired after this. You'll need the rest. But I wanted to just thank you for being here, for being vulnerable, for letting your walls down, because something for me, I always talk about with my husband, especially, is like, I don't relate to perfect people at all. Like people who have it all together, I just can't relate. People who never express anything, I can't relate because that's not me. I feel everything. And so when people are honest and vulnerable and let their walls down and let us in, I connect and I relate. And I think you're allowing so many people to connect with you and show them that, like, it's okay to not be okay,
Yeah.
but also I am okay now. Like, I think it was just I think you explained everything really well. I think you were vulnerable in all the right ways. I think you just did a great job sharing your story. And so I just want you to know that. And my question may be a little unconventional. And I am asking it for a reason. You're not a mom, but I want to ask you a question for moms. Um, and I guess for you to answer it as the child, not the mom. Um, what would your advice be to any mom out there who has a child who is starting to just say maybe things aren't right? Maybe they're complaining about random symptoms that really don't make sense, that would be really easy to brush off. Maybe they think it's just growing pains. Maybe they think they have low blood sugar. But what would your advice to be to these moms who have these kids who are going through these things? Like, what would your advice be to them? How to handle it, what to do, since you were that child once?
Yeah. So I actually deal with this a lot, more than you would think, because I see a lot of, I have such a heart for kids, and um, a lot of moms in the church know my story, so they come up to me and they're like, "What do I do? This is happening." And so I say, please listen to your kid. There could be something wrong, first off. But don't worry about, like, don't stress. Um, I try to push people, especially moms, to try the natural route first. So start one piece at a time, right? What are they eating? Do you have mold in your house? Have you seen a tick on them lately? I try to ask them these questions and try and pick their brain a little bit. And I say, okay, well, if you go, to the Western medical world, they're not really going to give you answers. Oh, try some Pepto-Bismol, whatever, they're going to do what they were taught to do, right? Which may help, but it could just also be a Band-Aid. So we want to make sure that we're getting to the root cause. Why is your kid having acid reflux? They're a baby, right? What's causing that? Or so I really try to, I have a lot of friends my age who are moms, and they're always asking me, I'm like, root cause, always try to dig deeper, continue to ask questions, continue to be aware of what's going on with your kid. And not obsessively, but just start educating yourself. It's, there's a lot of resources out there now, YouTube and podcasts like these. If you think that maybe they have Lyme, pull up a podcast, pull up this podcast, say, hey, maybe this is going on. And then try and find a provider that's more holistic minded, that will really get down to the root cause for you.
I think that was an answer that moms really needed to hear. So thank you for that.
And thank you both for joining us on the Tick Bootcamp podcast. This was really a beautiful episode of our podcast. As always, Amy, you were wonderful, and thank you for joining me as a co-host. And I'm really blessed that we were able to make a new friend today through Andrea, formerly known as Angria, who is now. It's hard to
I'm a new
believe
creation.
Yes, it's hard to believe that somebody with such a bright smile was such an angry young person. But thank you for putting Shrek behind you and bringing the very best version of you to our podcast. Thank you both very much for everything that you're doing for this community, and I know the two of you will continue to work hard for the folks in the Lyme disease community.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciated it.
Yes, thank you so much.